Well, welcome back to the channel, everybody. We're finally getting a chance to get out and do some mine exploration, and this mine has been requested by one of our faithful viewers. So Debbie, here's your look at the Mother Lode mine. So this Mother Lode mine, by the way, that's not the original name of this mine, which we'll get into in a minute, sits right above the Keating Valley, and it's on a belt that early on they believed was a copper belt through here. And there are several small copper mines along here, this being the largest out of them, with about 15,000 feet of underground workings to it. Now, before we get very far, those of you who are looking for an underground adventure, I don't think we're going to get it today. I'm pretty sure all these tunnels and adits have been collapsed or collapsed on their own. But we'll see. There might be a short one we can venture into. We'll have to get to that in a minute. But this mine was the largest of the copper mines along this belt. Originally, it was believed that this was a fairly large copper belt, but it turned out through a lot of exploration that it was not nearly as productive as they originally thought. Now, this was originally the North American Copper Mine, I believe was the name of it. I forgot my notes, so if that's wrong, I'll put it here on the screen. And it consisted of two different mines, and then it was kind of combined into one mine later on. On the other side of this little ridge here is the Poor Man Mine. And on this side is the Baum Creek Mine. That's Baum as in B-A-L-M. And the far side, the Poor Man side, was the one that was originally worked the most, up through the 1910s and into the 20s. It was worked more than this side. And there's about 4 parallel veins in here. And early on, they worked one of the veins that was a little further to the north. And then it kind of shut down. The copper in this mine, most of the assay work I've seen, wound up about 2.5% copper per ton, which for an underground mine is pretty low. For maybe an open pit mine, that might be acceptable, but for all the headache and work that you have to do for an underground mine, that's a pretty low amount of copper. It did have some gold and silver in it as well. The mine shut down for a while. In the early 30s, a guy by the name of John Arthur, which you'll hear me mention on several videos, he was a great promoter trying to get people to invest in his operations. He bought this property and invested some of his own money in it, and then made a big production out of getting investors to invest in this. He was certain that one of the veins that are a little further to the south was more gold than copper, and a lot of assay work was done, and the reports that came back from independent folks didn't show great promise, but the assay work that John had done showed a lot of promise. And he wrote a pretty long explanation of why the other guys didn't know what they were doing and he knew what he was doing. And some of the later reports by the Department of Geology, after the mine had shut down again, kind of went through and said, yeah, he probably got that amount of gold. I mean, like, some of his assays come out to like 40 ounces per ton. But that was probably from very thorough hand sorting of his specimens that he sent in. So there's spots that are probably fairly rich in there, but the overall grade of the material wasn't that great. So later in the 30s, after we got the operation up and going, they sank a shaft, which you'll see down here. There's a cement cap on top of it, which we'll dive into here in a minute. The BLM spent a ton of money removing all these tailings and putting a cap on that shaft. And that shaft is about 750 feet straight down. And it was open up till they capped it. It was still bubbling water out of it. It had a nice head frame over it, one of the few remaining head frames around here. And unfortunately, it was tore down during this process. It was really interesting to look at. I wish it was still there. And there was a pretty good sized tailing pile right down here, true tailings from the mill. And all that was hauled away and covered with dirt. Now, originally, this shaft on this side, before John Arthur took it over, I think was only down to about 300 feet. Through investors, he got enough money to sink it down to 750 feet. There's a few maps of this mine around on the internet, mainly from the Department of Geology. It doesn't look like the lower levels were worked all that much. Most of it was from the 400 level and up. And long story short, the mine went bankrupt. John Arthur come up with all kinds of, he had to write a letter to his investors on why he was shutting the mine down. And it's a kind of an interesting read, and it pretty much blames everybody but himself for what happened here. And I'm not saying that he was a scoundrel or anything like that. I think he honestly believed that there was a ton of gold in this mine, and otherwise, you know, a lot of these promoters of mines back in the day, they would get a bunch of money to invest, a bunch of people to invest money in the mine, and they'd do a little work and then just disappear and off with the money, you know, and they claim that it all went into production work. Well, as you can tell in this mine, he put a lot of work into digging that shaft down, putting tunnels everywhere. He did ship some ore off to a smelter because as a copper, silver, gold mine, at the mill level, that ore is, you have to get it smelted to get all the value out of it. So they'd process it to a certain point and then ship it. Now the shipping point for this mine, from what I've read, they actually used a small town to the west of here called Telecasset. There was a mill there, and a railhead went there, and so that's where they sent most of their ore there to get smelted, put on the rail, and I think it went to Vancouver, Washington to get smelted. Originally, and a lot of the documentation that he pumped out trying to get people to invest, he said that the railroad was going to extend that line to this mine so they could have a railhead right here and ship. Whether that was actually true, whether they were even thinking about it, who knows? But that's how they got the ore to the smelter. It's probably about 9-10 miles straight across. By road, it was, you know, probably 15 miles. I'm still not exactly, I can't really pin down how much during his production was shipped, but I don't think it was a huge amount. They did, from the size of the tailing piles that used to be down here, did process quite a bit of ore. And there was a mill on the far side, not a lot of remnants of it. And then this mill, I think we'll go down and look, but I think there's a few little cement foundations left. A lot of it was tore up when the BLM did this thing down here, trying to save the environment by taking all these heavy metals out of here. Now, was it worth that effort? I'm not really sure, but we'll go down here and look at this mine a little closer. It's got an interesting history to it, at least. And John Arthur, after this mine went bankrupt, he sold off some of the equipment to other mines in the area. The mill, it had a flotation mill. I think that mill actually wound up at the Golconda mine, if I'm not mistaken. And bits and pieces went to different mines in the area. So let's go down here and take a closer look at this mine. And there's some interesting remains on the other side of the hill that we'll go look at, and a pretty cool story to go along with the vertical shaft that was on the other side. So I was filming from over there, and now we're over here. What little remains of this mill. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot to begin with. All the old buildings have long since burnt down, but this is pretty much all that remains of the mill, is these cement foundations. You'll see this little pond that they made. Now, I blamed a lot of this on the BLM. It was kind of a combination of BLM and DEQ that come in here and did this. This was multi-million dollars to haul this whole area. Right in here was all fill before with tailings. And there's actually 2 settling ponds built in to those tailings. Not to settle the water from the shaft, but evidently they used it during the process of milling. Those things had 2 great big ponds built into those tailings. So I don't know how many thousands of yards they hauled out of here, but this was all filled in before. And now they've got this little settling pond down here, which I guess is the final bit before it dumps back into the stream. You can see the rocks down there. It kind of filters through those rocks and goes back into the stream water before the water from the shaft just kind of dumped right out into the stream. It's got a lot of iron in it. You can tell it's bright red when it comes up out of the ground, so it probably needed some kind of filtration done to it. Now, whether all these tailings needed hauled out of here, I'm not 100% convinced that they were hurting that much, but it's one of those projects they decided to take on and haul it out. And towards the end of the video, we'll go up and look at where they wound up dumping all of that material. While I'm here, I haven't been here around these cement blocks for, geez, probably almost 30 years. I was going to come take a look at them and document them while I'm here. Somebody's fine briefcase. And surprisingly, there's not a ton of pictures of this old mine. As easy as it is to get to, I would have thought there would have been more pictures of it. You can see the cement retaining wall that's slowly crumbling. The rest of the mill probably would have sat up there. And I think this mill was the second mill. Geocache? I don't even know if I want to open that. And if memory serves me correctly, this was a 60-ton flotation mill in here. Well, let's go look a little closer at the old shaft. Before we get too far along, on that hillside over there where I was at, you can see roads are cut in, and they're cut in right here. Those are from a mining company in the late 70s, early 80s. They came in here and did a lot of exploration work, did a lot of diamond drilling. I think they were hoping to uncover a large copper gold vein. Evidently, they didn't find too much. I've looked all over the internet trying to find what ever come about of that operation, and I really can't find any information about what they found or anything, but obviously not too much. They didn't start an operation here. Another interesting note, which we'll try and get up there to it here shortly, is up on top of this hill. The BLM noted on when they come in here to do this reclamation work that there was an air shaft up there. I don't personally think it was an air shaft. I think it was more likely an open stope, but we'll see if we can get up there and find it. Now we're up here where the head frame and the vertical shaft was. They've got this pretty well gated off. I'm guessing to keep animals out of this water. They put quite a lot of money into this process. As you can see from the aerial shot of the drone, that water has definitely got a lot of iron in it. You can just tell from the color of it. Well, it doesn't say keep out. Let's go over here and take a look. You can see some remaining foundation over there. I'm guessing that's from the hoist house. And this had a pretty large head frame over it, at least for this area. You know, it is dwarfed in comparison to some big mines. Well, that's interesting. This is just steel grates over the top of this. I thought they completely capped this. Oh. Try and get a shot down through there. We're standing directly over the vertical shaft. That water has got almost looks like oil residue on top of it. I remember this when I come up here snooping around as a teenager. That's what it looked like also, just oozing out of the ground with that color to it. I'm surprised they capped it like this. But evidently they've got it piped over. And it comes down through there. And gives it a chance for that heavy metal and material to settle out through these series of ponds they have. And then it goes on out to that last settling pond, which is right over the hill here, before it dumps into the creek. Now I don't know on these whether they have to come in periodically and get all that heavy metal out of those pools. I would guess you would have to. If it's constantly settling out of there, eventually it looks to me like it would fill up with material and dust as it blows in. So here's where the water comes out. And surprisingly, this water does not have any sulfur smell to it. A lot of the mines that have this iron colored water like this have a real strong sulfur smell to them, but this really doesn't. That's interesting. Looks like they can let it go into this series of 2 ponds or just go into that one, which still looks like there's a divider out there, probably a series of 2 ponds also. Maybe when one fills up they can use the second one, I don't know. And what this is, I'm not real sure, but from the air, this looked bright red. I thought the whole water was that color, but it's just the bottom. The road there used to be a little road that you could wind over the top, really rough. I used to take my little Chevy Love on it, but I think I'm just going to drive around the other hillside so I can avoid opening more gates. Now here's probably one of the most interesting parts of what's left of this mine. We're over on the Poor Man Mine side of the hill. So right over this ridge is where the shaft is that we were just at. And this is the older part of the mine from my understanding. Anything I can dig up about this mine, this was the older part of the mine. So I'm guessing this was a vault. You know, I've heard people say that it was a dynamite vault, but I kind of doubt it. Most of the time, they did not make them out of cement like this if they knew what they were doing, because if it exploded, all you had was a chance of lots of big chunks of cement shrapnel going everywhere. So this is me kind of reading into history a little bit here. I think what this was when John Arthur took this over, and I can't find a lot of newspaper articles to back this up, but it's kind of my theory that he had this built as kind of a promotion thing to say, this mine is so rich, this is the mother lode mine, that we need this vault. This is just kind of my interpretation of things. Cool little lizard hanging out right there. You see his tail sticking out. But it's a cool old vault. It's pretty well deteriorating over the years. It's in quite a bit worse shape than when I first started coming up here, when I had my driver's license at first, but it's still standing. And they did have, evidently, electricity. Let's change this so we can see what's going on in here. You can see the light fixture there. Pack rats or something have been coming up through the floor. And you can see it had wood in it at one time, I'm guessing shelving or something, and it's been burnt out, probably vandals. I'm guessing that's probably where the power come in. But it's a pretty neat old vault. It's the only one I've seen in this part of Northeast Oregon at a mine like this. And I've looked all over trying to find a picture of this, and I'm sure some exist, but I have not been able to find any of what this looked like, because obviously there was other buildings here with it. You can see the remains of the other buildings here. Now over here, a nice contoured hillside, that was a big waste rock pile. Again, the BLM hauled it all off. And here you can see actually some of the waste rock out of the mine. And most of this, I believe, was argillite, the country rock here. I did see over on the other side some spots that looked almost pure slate. And there's some quartz right there. We'll go over here. There was a tunnel that went in right up here. We'll go see. I'm pretty sure it's collapsed, but we'll go look at it. When I first started driving up here, that mining company had opened it and rehabbed it. It had a gate on it, so I never could get into it. but it looked like it was in pretty good shape. Well, it looked like it was easy to get to, but this little draw is really overgrown. And a small mill sat here, and I'm not sure if this was the only mill on this side of the hill. A lot of the foundation was hauled off, evidently, when they hauled off the waste rock, but you can see right here the one piece left of it. I'm hoping that was a deer that just took off. Yep, there it is. Be a rude awakening to come out here and find a bear. Oh guys, there is a young fawn right there. Scared the bejesus out of me. I'm trying to back out of here. Mom is really worried. I know, Mama. It's the first time I've walked up on quite a few little baby deer. That's the first time I've had one squall like that on me. Usually they just lay there perfectly still. That's a real young one, just a few days old. So I'm going to back up the hillside here. Hopefully Mama goes back down there to him. She's standing over there. I don't know if my mic's going to pick that up, but he's just raising a heck down there. No, you're going the wrong way, girl. I'm trying not to go back down there and spook her off again. I'm going to sit up here for a second. No, you're going the wrong way. Okay, I need to keep moving. Well, there's the tunnel entrance right down there. It's obviously collapsed. Some water seeping out. And this went through the hillside, or this ridge, and connected to the mine on the other side. Supposedly there was a tunnel entrance on that side, right above that shaft. And in the past, I've looked around for it and I never could find it. Come on, Mama, she's way up on that stinking hill. I gotta get out of here so she'll come back. Boy, that little baby, he's just having a fit. Looks like there was a little adit here. It doesn't show up on any of the maps that I had. That's one thing I found strange about this mine, is usually when John Arthur got involved, he made maps and drawings galore, but I really can't. I found a couple that he did for this mine, but not a whole lot. A lot of iron in that rock. Okay, so I hiked around. I'm back on the road. Still hear that baby having a cow over there. You can see over there where the portal would have been. And it went pretty much that way through the mountain, or that hill. And originally, I didn't think it went in very far, but according to the maps I found, it went all the way through and had quite a few branches off of it. You know, several thousand feet of working in there. So there's Mama. She just worked her way back up that hillside. She's working her way back down to her little baby. Her baby's right there in that brush pile. So I feel a little better. She didn't run over that other hill and abandon the baby. Like I said, I have walked up on, I don't know how many little young fawns. And some of them, you almost step on them, they won't make a noise. That little guy, he just started squalling as soon as he saw me. I don't think he's over 2 or 3 days old at the most. Okay, let's get out of here. So as we drove up, you've seen this contoured hillside that I'm currently on. And that is another fairly decent sized waste rock pile. And it came from 2 sources. And what they did here, I'm not sure how much of this they hauled out or just covered with fabric and then put some other soil on top, is what it looks like to me. Originally, where all that waste rock come from was somewhere in this general area. I can't remember exactly where. There was a vertical shaft. I think it went down about 400 feet. And again, this is the poor man side, the poor man workings. So this was the original workings over here. This most likely was designed for copper in mind. Now right back there, as I drove up, I showed a little shot of the portal entrance that went into a fairly extensive system back here that they drifted on the vein. And as you can see in the map here, it kind of went all over back there. You know, the map shows that coming out right next to the vertical shaft, like right almost where the vertical shaft is, which isn't really correct if my memory serves me right. And the reason I say that I don't think the map was quite correct, now, mind you, my memory is from when I was like 10 to 12 years old, somewhere in that area. And so it's been a while, 30 some years. But as a kid, my parents were up the draw here, looking around at a spring there, seeing if there was any sign of Indian artifacts and all that kind of stuff, back before they knew that you shouldn't do that. But anyway, they were up the draw here a ways. And so I was down here, ever since I was a kid, I was interested in mining and rocks and everything. So I was down here farting around by these tailing piles, trying to figure out what was going on. Well, as I remember it, right here, this little rock outcropping behind me is where the vertical shaft was. And there was a partial head frame. The head frame was fairly intact. Right around the collar of the shaft, it had collapsed in some. But you could still see down the shaft a ways. I don't know how far down it went, but you could still see in the shaft. And that head frame was still partially intact. I'd say it was about 2/3 of its original height. It had kind of crumbled a little bit. And I was dinking around throwing rocks down in there, and then I wandered off down over the edge of this waste rock pile, pounding on rocks and carrying on. And I heard this tremendous rumbling noise, and I couldn't figure out what the heck was that. I come running back up the top of the pile here, and I looked, and where that head frame was completely gone. The collar had finished collapsing, and the head frame had fell in and just filled the top of that shaft completely in. I hope that it was just one of those coincidences that it just happened to be when I was up here, and I wasn't that close to just causing my own demise, because I was standing pretty close to the edge of that collar, that shaft, when I was throwing those rocks in. And it opened up a little bit, that collar did, when it collapsed. The hole expanded out a little bit as that material slumped down in. It kind of was an eye-opener for me as a young kid. They stay the heck away from those things. Vertical shafts are pretty dangerous. You never know how stable those collars are. And if you don't know what a collar is, that's the top of the shaft, right where it enters the ground. That's called the collar. And so those can be really, really unstable. I don't ever recommend getting really close to a collar of any shaft. You just never know what's going to happen. So that's my story from a kid of collapsing mines And like I said, I don't know if it just happened to be when I was here or me throwing rocks down in there was the last straw. Who knows? But yeah, it was interesting, especially as a kid. And I went back up and I kind of kept it from my parents for a long time. I didn't want them to know that I was up here doing that kind of stuff. So let's go look around a little bit more. Like I said, the map shows this this tunnel taking off right here where the portal would have been, but I see no evidence of it right here. I think it was down there just another 30, 40 yards is where the entrance actually was. And unfortunately, it's completely collapsed. That would be a really, really fun adit to go explore. It looks, if memory serves me right, it's been a few weeks since I looked at the map, but there's several thousand feet of working back in this hillside. So unfortunately, it's completely collapsed. Unless there's an open stope or an air shaft up there, then we're pretty much out of luck, because that looks like it would be a lot of digging to open that back up. While we're here, we'll just pan around here a little bit. So as we pan around here, you can see a basement or root cellar. I mean, it might have been a vault, but it doesn't look anything like the vault down below. There was no cement roof on that one. I think there was probably a building sitting on top of it at one point. Then right over that ridge is where actually be right about over there is where that shaft is, the 750-foot shaft. And you can see a road that goes up there. I don't know if that road was originally there. I know for a fact that the guys in the 80s, if it was there, they expanded it quite a bit to go up and do their diamond drilling. There's little roads all over this hillside out here where they diamond drilled, and the hill right behind me the same way. They did a lot of core drilling in here. So unfortunately, I have been able to find very little pictures of the Poor Man mine. I think I might have found one, and if I can find it again, I'll put it on the video. Most of the pictures that do remain are on the other side of that ridge of what is commonly known as the Mother Lode mine. And just to clarify, this was not originally the Mother Lode mine. This was the Poor Man mine and the Baum Creek mine. And when John Arthur come in, I'm pretty sure he's the one that coined the phrase, the Mother Lode mine, during his promotion, trying to get investors involved in the mine. So I made it up on the ridge between the two mines, and you can see the holding ponds and the cap on the big shaft below me. And I come up here, and I'm wondering if this is what they're talking about, an air shaft up here. You can see this vein material along here. Very distinct, lots of iron in it. The other thing I see that's pretty interesting is right above that, those holding ponds, I see a little water down there, and I'm wondering, it's been a pretty wet spring, whether that tunnel that comes in from this side is actually seeping a little water right now. We might be able to go down there and find it. Let's go down here. This almost looks like a glory hole. Yeah, this definitely looks like a glory hole they had. They stoped out from below a large stope and collapsed in. We'll go up above here and look just a little bit, see if we see anything else. So we're up above that glory hole. You can tell we've switched into basalt lava flow, and right below us is where that flow evidently stopped. And up above me here, it looks like originally, you know, if you look from the road, it kind of looks like somebody had been doing dozer work up there in the last 15, 20 years. But I think what it is the hillside's just actually moving up there, slowly slumping off and creating those push piles. Well, I certainly don't see anything up in here. So right up there is that glory hole. I come down here, and sure enough, I don't know how I missed this. Of course, this has been 30 years ago since I looked at this. But right here was where that adit went in above the main 750-foot shaft. And this goes back in, and somewhere back in there it meets up with the tunnel from the other side. But that's where it's at. Just clear as day. Well guys, I'm kind of going to wrap this up for today, but I took a little drone footage of maybe a couple openings over there. I'm not real sure. It's really hard to tell on my little phone when I'm flying what I'm looking at. But when I get back, I'm going to look at that a little closer and see if we need to come back and investigate a couple spots I flew over. But this Poor Man mine, actually the Mother Lode mine, I think there's a lot more history here to dig up. I'd never really researched this mine too much until I was asked to do this video about this mine. I always thought it was a copper mine, so I really didn't give it a whole lot of attention because I'm not that interested in copper mines. It wasn't until I did a little research and found out the last few years of this mine's life, it was actually a gold mine. There was copper and silver as other commodities in the mine, but the main commodity John Arthur was after was the gold. And he dumped a lot of his own money and a lot of investors' money into this mine. From what I've been able to read, before he took over, this mine had maybe 6,000 feet of workings in it. When he was done, after his operation ended, there was 15,000 feet of workings in this mine. So he dumped quite a bit of time and effort into finding that mother lode, and I think he actually believed there was a mother lode here. Just never really panned out for him. His essays looked pretty good, but it just didn't really pan out in the real world. Like I said, there's probably a lot more history to this mine. I wish I could find some more pictures of this old mine. And especially since it operated up into the 30s, there should be a ton of pictures of this mine, and I really can't find all that many pictures of this mine. And really not a lot of maps of this mine either. There's a few, but not nearly as many as I would expect, especially being John Arthur was in control of it. So stay tuned to the very end and I'll take you by the big pile where they hauled all the waste rock and tailings out to. And down the draw here just a little ways, about a quarter mile, was another large containment pond. I guess it was a settling pond of really, really fine sediment. And they hauled all that out of there too and put it in that same pile. And they piled it, put a waterproof barrier over the top, and then topsoil on top of that to keep water from leaching any of that heavy metal down into the ground. And how they know that's working is they drilled a series of wells out there, and they go take samples every so often to make sure none of that metal is showing up in the groundwater. Was it a good thing or bad thing? I really don't know. It was cost a lot of money to do, and you can tell from the wastewater coming out of this vertical shaft below me, you know, there's obviously a lot of metal, a lot of iron in this water. So I don't know. You know, only time will tell whether that proved to be a great thing or just a lot of money spent. Anyway, thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed. And we'll see you guys on the next video. So right up in here, this big mound that used to be a little draw through there, and they just filled it in with the waste rock and tailings, covered it with topsoil and planted the native grass on it. If you didn't know they had done that, it just looks like regular hillside there. Right over here is one of the wells that they take samples out of. If I remember right, there's another one down the draw here a ways. But yep, that's where it all wound up, right there. There was copper and gold as a secondary product to the mine. There was copper and silver as a there was copper and silver as other commodities in the mine, but the main